Okay, the following is going to be a tutorial of how you're going to import your parabola pictures into Desmos and manipulate it so that you can come up with an equation that is going to model the parabola in your picture. When you log on up here to desmos.com, it's going to ask you to create an account, and you're going to either want to create one through Desmos, or if you have a Gmail account already, you can sign in through Gmail, which I've already done, and it'll bring up your name. You'll also have to make sure that you have taken your picture and downloaded it somewhere onto your computer so that you can access it. So the first thing, once you're in, is you're going to have to go over to this plus button to add an item, and you're going to go down to Image. You're going to find where you stored your picture, and mine's all the way down here at the bottom. And it's going to import it in for you. When Desmos imports it in, it's going to center the picture along the origin. This may be good for your picture, and it may not be good for your picture. So you may have to play around with the center and also with the size of your picture. Right now my parabola is a little small, and so I'm going to make sure it's one of the corners, not here or here. We want to keep the aspect ratio the same. One of the corners, and I'm going to blow it up so that I can see my parabola a little bit better. Okay, now the first time that I want to come up with an equation, I'm going to use the vertex form. So the easiest way for me to do that is I want to make sure that my vertex is right here, centered on the x-axis. The y-axis. To make sure that I'm at the vertex, I should have from one side to the other be equivalent distance from the center. Right now you can see this is at 2, 3, the inside of the parabola, and over on this side it's not quite there. I might have to move it over a little bit to the left if I wanted to be centered. Also, up and down, I need it to be on some sort of integer. Right now, do you see it's kind of hard because it's water that I don't have one clean line. So I'm going to choose the outside of this stream to be the parabola that I modeled. And you might have to do that, right? Because your parabola may be thick or thin. And depending on that, you're going to decide to do the outside of it or the inside of it. All right, so over here, when we go to the center, the first one is our x-coordinate. And basically, if I put a positive number in there, it's going to move my picture to the right. So like if I put in 1, you see it shifts it to the right. And I'll go back and put in 0. The y-coordinate is going to make it go up and down. And if I put in a positive number, it's going to make it go up. And again, if I put in a negative number, it shifts it down. So I'm going to go back to 0 and figure out which way I want to shift it. So you'll notice that each block is worth 0.5. So here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, here's 3.5. I want to get it on an integer, so I'll want to move it up 0.5. So I'm going to enter in 0.5. And don't be surprised if you might have to put in something like 0.12 or 0.17 or something like that to get it to shift it. You'll just have to play around with the numbers until the top or the bottom of your parabola, whatever you're using, is right on the y-axis. Now I need to shift it over a little bit left and right. Since I decided I'm using the outside of my parabola, here it's going somewhere at almost 3.5, and here it's way past 3.5. So I'm going to need to shift it a little bit to the left, which in that case I'm going to have to use a negative number. So I'm going to try negative 0.25 and see what that does. All right, here I'm at 3 and maybe a half. Here's at 3.5. It's kind of hard to see, but I'm going to say that that is pretty well centered. All right, now I'm going to go to plus again. Click on plus. And I'm going to add a table. And now I'm going to pick out some points on my parabola. Well, here's my vertex, so I'm going to put that in first. That's at 0, 4. So we have 0 and 4. And it's going to put a little dot in for us. We'll hit enter. And now I want to pick out 2 more points that are on right on intersections. So here's one right here. So that's going to be at 2.5 and 1, 2. So I'm going to put 2.5 and let's see, what do we see? 2. There we go. And my instructions say I need to pick 1 more point. I'm going to pick this point right here. It's clearer on this side. This is at 2.5 and it looks like 1. So enter, and I'm going to do, let's see, sorry, this is at 3.5, 3.5, and 1. And the good thing is that it'll put it there, and I can say, whoa, 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 I was really off there. Let me go back and count that again. This is actually at 3 and 1. So let me go back and adjust that. And put in 3. Now it's at my spot that I had. Also, we're going to go over to the graph settings, and so we can see things a little clearer. Let's make sure that it's in projector mode, and you'll notice that that makes everything show up a little bit darker, and that's also going to be better for our presentation. So now I can really see all of my lines. All right, now here comes the part where you're going to have to do it on paper. You're going to use your vertex form, y equals a x minus h squared plus k, and you are going to plug in your values of h and k. In my scenario, I have my h at 4, and I'm sorry, my h is at 0, and my k is at 4. So then I'm going to plug in another one of my points. I can either plug this one in, 2.5 and 2, or 3 and 1 to solve for A. Now, for me, I'm going to pick 3 and 1. That way I don't have to worry about the decimals. All right. Once I did that, I came up with what my formula is. And I want to enter this into Desmos to see if the parabola that I have created, the equation I have, models my parabola. So I'm going to go back to add item, and now I'm going to add an expression. Mine ended up being y is going to be equal to negative, and actually, let's go down here to this show keypad. Might be a little bit easier. And I can put in my negative. I'm going to go ahead and use a set of parentheses. Mine ended up being a fraction. You can either put it in as a decimal or a fraction. I'm going to put it in as a fraction though. And we have x, and you can just hit there to square it. And I'm going to have plus 4. Oops, that's not a plus. And there we go. And I'll get rid of this keypad. And so now we can see right here that it pretty well models my parabola. So I think I did a good job. If it doesn't, you need to go back and check your algebra. You're also going to want to make sure that you put this in standard form for when you complete your project. But for the purposes of Desmos, you can just do this. But this is a good way to check. After you've done it, you can enter this in Desmos in standard form, and it should plot one right on top of the other. All right, the last step is going to be we want to use this equation to predict a fourth point. So I want you to choose a point that isn't going to end up right on an integer. Do you see up here if I chose 0.5, well no, actually if I chose 0.5 it looks like it might end up right on some crosshairs here, but if I chose 1 it ends up being kind of in between. So I'm going to choose 1 and plug this into my equation. So I did that on my calculator and I will get a y. Now I'm going to go back up to my table and I'm going to put in what my model predicted. When I put in 1, it said I should get 11 thirds. So I'm going to put in 11 thirds. Oops. And you'll see that, oh, there's my pick, there's the point, and it sure enough, it lands right on my model and right on my parabola. And now I'm done with doing the first one, centering my vertex right on the x-axis. Okay, now that I'm done, you'll probably want to do a couple of things to save it. One is you can share your graph right here, and I can go ahead and email this to myself. You can email it to your teacher, right, so that you make sure that they get it. And then I can also, for my own records, I can go and print it off. If you're doing this at school, make sure that you do it in black and white if you're going to be turning it into the teacher just for the first time. But for presentations, it should probably be in color. Okay, I'm going to get out of here and cancel it because I don't really need to save mine. And then once we're done with this, we can also save it. We can give it a title. It'd probably been a good idea to give it a title before I went off and saved it somewhere. But I can click and save it under a different name. Once I'm done with that, now I can start over again and get rid of all of this stuff. And what we want to do this time is we want to recenter our graph at this point, making sure that the parabola, one of the ends is centered at 0, 0, one of the x-intercepts, and the other one is somewhere else. And I can make it go this way, or I can make it go, this way. Doesn't really matter. All right, so I need to move it to the right, which means I'm going to have to add some stuff onto here. And it looks like if I want to move it to the right, I'm going to need to center, put it over 1 block, 2 blocks, 3.5 blocks. So I'm going to have to add 3.5 to this, which is going to be 3.25, I believe. Let's try it. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And now I have 1 intercept right here and 1 intercept right here. So I go back to my table. And just to let you know, you may not, once it's here, it might not fall right onto a integer. And in that case, you may need to adjust the up and down, the y coordinate, so that it is at a place where it's going to hit at 0, 0 and an integer on the other side for your x-intercept. I was lucky, I didn't have to do that. So I'm going to go straight into entering my table. And of course, I already said that one of my x-intercepts is going to be 0, 0. And my other one is going to be here at 7, 0. 7, 0. Okay, and let's look, and we want to find one more point. Here's one right here that looks pretty good, and that's at 6, 2. So I'm going to put in 6, 2. All right, now I have all the information I need to now write my parabola in intercept form. So I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to calculate this by hand. And while you're doing this, make sure that you keep a copy of it because it's going to have to show up in your presentation how you came up with this. All of your calculations must be shown. All right, so I've done my calculation. So now I want to enter the expression and check to see how close it is to my parabola. I'm putting it in intercept form this time. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to have y equals, surprise, surprise, my a value ended up being the exact same thing. Unless you had to manipulate it, it probably should end up being the same. But if you stretched it some more or moved it around, it possibly could have changed. All right, so I have x minus 0, and my other intercept is at x minus 7. And pretty good job modeling the outside of it again. My last step is going to be to plug in some other value to predict. And again, we want to try to find something like maybe this one right here that's kind of, well, let's see, this one that's kind of in between. So I'm going to plug in 4.5 and see what I get for a value. Okay, so I'm going to go up here and add my point. I wanted it to be 4.5, and when I plugged it into my model, I ended up getting 15/4. So, and looks pretty good. We can see we're just a little off at the top when we use this method. Last method we were really close to the vertex because we used the vertex as one of our points. Here, of course, it went right through both of our intercepts because we use intercepts. So it's not perfect parabola, but the model really comes close. Of course, gravity is pulling that water down, and there might be other things in your picture that kind of affect why it's not a perfect parabola. But you'll address that in your report. All right, I'll do the same thing of going over and titling it, saving it, sharing it with myself and the teacher, and making a printout. And that concludes the tutorial. Good luck!